So, ladies and gentlemen, episode number 5 of Mazda Motorsports Moments, and this is a really cool one because I think the first 4 have been looking back. Well, now today we get to focus on a moment we're in and a moment we're going to be experiencing. Nelson Cosgrove, new to the Mazda Motorsports family, came in a really unique, a really pivotal time, and he is now the man charged with leading Mazda Motorsports into the future 2020 and beyond. Nelson, we are happy to have you with us. We are grateful you're here. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing really well, Tony. Thanks for the introduction. I'm doing great. Great weather right now in the Carolinas, so I'm happy to be on talking to you today about the future.
Well, you hit on my first topic. You're great at segues. You could have my job, but please don't take it. I need this job. You are located down in the Carolinas because the little bit of information I have on you is you come from the NASCAR side of the world. And obviously down there in Charlotte and the Carolinas, that's where that whole hub exists. So tell folks a little bit about where you come from. I know you've worked for TRD. You've spent time at Penske. What was life before Mazda Motorsports like for you?
Most recently, up until November of last year, I worked for Toyota Racing Development. And I was there for about 5 years, but I was at Joe Gibbs Racing from 2002 to really up to 2015. And then when the opportunity came to go over to TRD, I was able to move kind of across to the TRD side of the taking Toyota to NASCAR project. But really, I was with that same group of people from about 2007 to about 2015. So it was really quite a long time, all the way through to 2020 or the end of 2019. So I was technical director at Joe Gibbs Racing, and that started in 2002. And before that, we came down here. We actually moved to Charlotte. We live in Davidson, which is a small college town kind of up in the Lake Norman area, kind of made famous by Steph Curry. But we've been here since kind of the fall of '99. When I went to work for Penske Racing, and like I said, I got recruited over to JGR, and then went to Toyota. So it's been a pretty big adventure for the last 20 years. I started my career at Ford Motor Company and worked there in the early '90s, and got involved with Indy cars with them, and kind of spent a bunch of time working on Indy cars and a little bit in Formula One. And then in the late '90s, the NASCAR stuff began to kind of rapidly expand from a technical standpoint. And so when I had the opportunity to move, Michelle and I and my wife, we made the decision to move to Charlotte. So it's been great.
So obviously a lot of time in the Carolinas and NASCAR and stock car focus. TRD, I think for folks who know the stock car side, TRD really took NASCAR and stock car racing by storm when they really put their rubber to the road, and they just went on a tear in NASCAR during that generation you talked about being there. Toyota, obviously a very famous and well-known Japanese automotive manufacturer, and now you land at Mazda, another incredibly well-known and famous Japanese automotive brand. Is there any crossover between the two on your way over here? Have you learned anything that you can bring over to the Mazda side?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, it's learning about Japanese culture, learning how the Japanese culture is infused inside of Toyota. When I got onboarded into Mazda, I felt really comfortable. In fact, it's actually it's infused with some of the ideals of Japanese culture. So I got to see a little bit of that when I was at Toyota. I made a few trips to Japan, and I've come to really enjoy that culture and how everybody kind of treats each other. And I was terrified of the food at first, but I'm not anymore. Not really a big sushi guy, but I mean, it's part of the problem.
You talked about getting onboarded at Mazda and coming over. So talk us through that transition. Obviously, John steps out at the end of last season to assume his role at IMSA. You are brought in, and at least for myself, and I think some other people on this side of the racing world, sports cars and the Mazda side, a bit of a relative unknown you are. So
Yeah.
how does Mazda find you? How do you end up in this position leading Mazda Motorsports?
It's funny because I didn't really know John. I didn't really get to know John at all. I got a phone call from him in July, like July 3rd of last year. Kind of asking, would I have any interest in doing it? And it came through basically the guys at Multimatic, who I've known for a very, very long time. Stephen Charlesley and Larry Holt, I think, were the ones that really recommended me. And, John had done some homework and done a bit of asking around about me. But I got to know John a bit during the summer. And by the time we got to the fall, it had become an open position at Mazda, and I interviewed for it with Morrison, and I think it went reasonably well, and I was able to I really was able to have a good conversation with David Wilson and Andy Graves, who was my boss at TRD, and they were really supportive of me doing it. So so that was really one of the things that led me to take the job. And I had done a lot of stock car racing, but we had also gotten pretty heavily involved in the Lexus sports car program, the GTD program. And I had spent a lot of time in the IMSA garage over the last 4 seasons doing, supporting that program. Steve Hallam runs it, but I was doing I would go on the endurance weekends and other weekends and just kind of help support him and make sure that he had another set of feet on the ground to those are long weekends. They're hard to kind of navigate. And so I had gotten to know the IMSA garage pretty well, and I really enjoyed it. So when it came time to make the decision to leave Toyota, and the Toyota guys were really supportive, I really enjoyed meeting Morrison, and so we were able to put a deal together, and here I am.
That's how you get from Toyota to Mazda. Really cool to hear. I think some folks would be surprised, but pleasantly surprised to hear that Toyota was so okay and even supportive of you coming over to the Mazda Motorsports side. Again, I find it interesting that you've got 2 massive Japanese auto manufacturers operating and doing really well in the U.S., and you're the guy that's bouncing between the both of them. So now you're at Mazda, and to kind of streamline the story, you end up in the fall at Mazda Motorsports. We get ready to go racing, and then the world stops spinning due to COVID and all these other things that are going on.
Well, it really kind of stopped spinning when we got to when Long Road Racing decided to close its doors. So that was the beginning of the stop of the racing. But yeah, no, there was a lot going on.
Absolutely. And the point in all that is we don't get a chance to bring you out and you spend a lot of time at races, and now all these events are getting canceled. So it's a tough question, and yourself stepping into this new role in such an uncertain time. I know this is maybe a loaded question, but we want to check in on the direction of a few facets of the Mazda Motorsports world. We'll start with everybody's, the thing that most people are familiar with, the DPI program in the IMSA
Sure.
WeatherTech Sports Car Championship. What can you tell us about that program? Where is it going, and how do things look currently?
Yeah, so the DPI program that we run in the WeatherTech Championship, that we had a great series of tests in December. We roll into Daytona, and we leading up to Roar was a pretty good event for us. We set fast laps and things like that, and we get to Daytona, and and hadn't had a lot of success in the past few years with that package. With really failures of that put the car out of the race. So we had done a bunch of testing in the fall. We had a really good test in December, and it really all came together. So and we didn't really know at the time, but that was our last race with Team Yost. So we finished second with the 77 car. We had some some trouble getting the 55 to the end, but it was, really a strong race for us. I think we, we raced the 10 car for hours and hours and hours, and unfortunately came out the wrong side of that. But in the end, I was really proud of the whole team and everything that had come together, and it was a really great event for us. So we came out of there. We had hoped to have another really strong showing at Sebring. We had tested there in the fall, and then it got canceled. So, like you said, the world kind of stopped spinning. During that period of time, we made the change to go race with Multimatic as our partner. And that's been a bit challenging for those guys because they've unfortunately been caught in the whole COVID-19 shutdown piece, trying to get their operation up and running. But we were initially expecting to go racing with them at Long Beach in April, but now it's going to end up being the July 3rd and 4th event at Daytona. So we're good to go. We've got the cars and the pit equipment and everything else that you need to really start racing are all built up and ready to go. Kart stuff's beautiful. We've, I've been privileged enough to get all the photographs, and I talk to those guys daily. Haven't spent a lot of time at the race team, obviously, because but it's, we're getting ready to roll out, and I'm looking forward to seeing those guys come out. Right now with the schedule, we're planning on, we're going to run the whole way to the end of the year with the same driver lineup. We have, we're excited to have those guys get back in the car and go. So that's kind of where we are with the DPI program. I'm excited. I think that from a technical standpoint, we're not going to miss a beat. I mean, it's the same technical group that's been on those cars for the last couple of seasons, and with Vince and Lena, and it's been great.
So now, Nelson, I want to talk about everybody's favorite racing series in the world, especially mine, since I'm paid to go talk about it.
Yeah.
It's the Battery Tender Global MX-5 Cup presented by our friends at BF Goodrich. I don't know if that series was on your radar. It should have been before you came over to Mazda. Everyone loves it. It's the best thing in the world. Where is MX-5 Cup situated once we get back racing? And do you have a favorite driver in the series yet? Go ahead.
Yeah, so the MX-5 Cup Series, we've worked really hard with Anderson Promotions, and Dan and all his guys and Michelle, and we had to move the schedule around quite a bit. There was quite a bit of we didn't really know what to do in the beginning part of this whole thing. But I think we have actually a really solid schedule now. So, we're going to start off in July at Road America. We're paired with the Brian Redmond Vintage Weekend there, which is a great weekend. And we're going to get started with that. And then, we're going to roll through the next several events. We're actually paired with IMSA at Mid-Ohio, which is a kind of a new thing for us, a little bit outside of the normal IndyCar weekend, but it's because of the way that the scheduling worked out. That's how we ended up going forward with it. It's been great to kind of put that whole thing together. Jonathan Applegate, who has a good relationship with all the teams and drivers, he's been in contact with everybody, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback about it. The cars are going to start out with a bit of a difference. The ND2 cars this year, they'll have a sequential transmission in them for the first time. So we're excited about that. That was mainly a durability piece that had gotten started under John Doonan, and we're ready to roll that out now. So the testing has gone pretty well. And Bliss Performance, who took over the build and the engineering of the car, has been working really hard with SADEV, the transmission partner, to get all that done. So overall, it's a great series. It's kind of the soul of the company, the MX-5, and we're, it might sound corny, but it's kind of real. The the performance of the car is kind of the soul of the company. So we're excited to get it started. Everybody can't wait.
So Nelson, that's all that about MX-5 is great to hear. And I agree with you. I think it's the heart, it's the soul of Mazda Motorsports. So many people love watching that racing on the IndyCar weekends and when it's going to be at the IMSA race at Mid-Ohio this fall. But you don't get to MX-5, and there is no MX-5 without Mazda Motorsports' Grassroots program. It's the strongest in the world when you look at an auto manufacturer's level of racing in the grassroots arena. It's Mazda dominated. So what can you tell us about the grassroots side of things for Mazda Motorsports here in 2020 and moving forward?
Yeah, Tony. I mean, so for me coming into to the Mazda director job, I didn't know anything about grassroots racing. You know, I've been in pro racing for so long that I didn't really know anything about it. So I've been really fortunate, I mean, to learn a lot about this stuff from our team. I mean, we've got the biggest part of our group. You know, we've got almost our entire group is dedicated to grassroots. So we, you know, through all the SCCA and NASA events and even autocross with the SCCA, a lot of track day cars, there's just a tremendous number of Mazdas raced around the country every weekend. You know, it's over half of the SCCA entries are Mazdas. So, you know, there's a loyal following, but we have inherently raceable cars, as Mo likes to say. And, you know, we've got a good contingency program. And so people are you know, incentivized to really come out with their cars. You know, this year we've got a spec MX-5 program that's launching, and looks like it's going to be a really good program if we can get back racing as soon as we can.
Good to hear on the grassroots side of things, and you know, there is no getting around the fact that when you go to any SCCA, any NASA track event, there are so many Mazdas there competing. So
Yeah.
we switch from Mazda's most popular leg of the motorsport side, which is the grassroots side, to their 007, their covert operations side. And that is, everybody's been wanting to know, Mazda makes announcements last year. We're coming back to the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge. We're going to field a TCR entry. And then things have kind of gone silent since then. What can you tell us about TCR and Mazda's involvement in that series moving forward?
So when we got into, when I got into the, into Mazda Motorsports kind of in November, you know, I had spent a little bit of time visiting long road racing. They had some development issues with the car, you know, as they were doing the development. So we ended up having to wave off on starting the season with the car. You know, initially we were going to race at Daytona with it, but it was really in need of a lot more testing. And then when long road racing closed its doors at the end of December, we had to find a new place for that car, and so you know, we were getting ready to develop that. Unfortunately, part of the situation financially with COVID-19, we've been forced to put a stop to that program. And you know, it was a really difficult decision. You know, I did a lot of work consulting with our people inside of Mazda North America. You know, we were all incredibly disappointed to have to do that, but that's kind of where we left it at the moment.
So Nelson, the next part about Mazda Motorsports that I think absolutely can't get overlooked, and it can't get talked about enough, and it's from every person inside the corporation all the way down to the grassroots racers, is the sense of family that Mazda Motorsports puts out. It instills in its customers, it instills in its events. Mazda Motorsports, to me, in my entire tenure in racing, truly feels more like a family than any other program I've ever been a part of. You are new to that family, but you're a massive part of the family. What have you seen from your position as Director of Operations for Mazda Motorsports North America? And I guess maybe to put you on the spot, how do you plan on continuing to cultivate that family atmosphere that no other brand in racing seems to have right now?
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I mean, it is, everybody that I've met at Mazda, from the top to the bottom, is super enthusiastic about the motorsports programs. It's kind of ingrained inside the whole company. And it's everybody from people walking around headquarters in Irvine with the DPI on their T-shirts to the emails that I get from people about how excited they are to watch the racing. So it's been great. And that extends out to everybody that competes and is a fan of ours in the motorsports arena. So it's been an interesting time. I mean, I've not experienced that really anywhere else that I've worked. And I've been part of really big motorsports programs. But it's a large family. Everybody, I think, cheers for us. We've got a situation where we've got this long legacy of cars that people really love, and they can put a lot of effort into working on those cars, and they're inherently drivable. They've got they've just got a lot of cachet to them, and they're great cars to drive. So I think going forward, I think I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I think when John had the job, I mean, he's obviously one of the great Mazda cheerleaders in that role. And, I really hope that going forward, we continue to act as a family and to invest in Grassroots and all those things that kind of we can grow together.
So I think that's a great answer, and your plan of coming in and just keeping the ball rolling, and that's how it grows, that's how it gets bigger, and that's how people feel more included, which from a business standpoint is how you get more people into Mazda race cars and competing at the events and doing it. So it's great to hear that you want to just continue to grow the family the size that it is. Just some general stuff on you. When we get going, we're at the IndyCar races, we're at the Mid-Ohio races with MX5, I apologize. Yeah. And then IMSA has a great calendar. What are some of the places you're really looking forward to getting to go and represent Mazda here in 2020 once we get racing?
Well, I mean, it's funny because like within the calendar right now, I mean, it's some of my favorite places, right? I mean, I love Road America. I think it's, I'm excited to get to Road America. There's so much history there. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to going into Siebken's in Elkhart Lake and looking at all the stickers on the wall. I mean, and on the ceiling. I mean, it's funny. It's something I love to see the history of the sport. I love going to Sebring. I was sad that we couldn't get there earlier this year, but as a gift, we get to go twice. I'm not totally sure I want to be there in July. It's going to be a little hot, but I love that. I love going to Monterey. Those are the places I'm excited to be. It's going to Laguna Seca is fun, and Watkins Glen is kind of my home track growing up. So it's also, I was born actually at the top of the lake. So I was born on an Army base in Geneva, New York. So not too far from there. So Watkins Glen, I love. I'm excited to get there for the fall, which I've never been there in the fall really to race. So from the way that the calendar's laying out, it's pretty ideal for me.
Well, New York in the fall, I'm sure you can attest, even when we go back racing, is going to be lovely. So we're going to go there and film some walk around in the leaves, changing colors with you.
Yeah.
But the bad news for you is once we get the schedule going, I've looked at it, and it looks like you and I and this Mazda family are going to be around each other almost every the entire fall of 2020. You hit on Watkins Glen and you hit on Road America. I want to ask you quickly before we wrap up. Those are two tracks last year that Mazda scored victories at.
Yeah, they were. Yep.
And really strong victories, mind me. Has there been added pressure for you coming in and taking over the role after the summer that saw 3 dominant wins, and now you're the guy charged with recreating that? What's the pressure been like coming into Mazda Motorsports after such a successful 2019?
Tony, it's a great question. I mean, I think you got to take every year as its own. I mean, I think I've been racing too long to believe that you can roll year over year into success. So, I mean, it was super impressive what those guys were able to accomplish last year. 3 in a row in an IMSA competition is amazing. I mean, it just isn't. It's not normal in terms of the way that things work out. It ends up being execution, and there's a whole bunch of things that actually come out of. Um, the race is crazy because everybody's so packed together, and they came out of it and were able to win the races. In terms of this year, I mean, obviously there's some pressure. I'm not really too fazed by pressure. I mean, at this point, I mean, you race NASCAR every week for 20 years. It's like, you realize you got to keep, you just got to keep going. You can't say, oh my goodness, there's so much pressure. You just go. I mean, it just becomes part of what you do. Racing 38 weekends, it teaches you that there's another weekend coming. So you got to have a short memory, and you got to work on the problems. The biggest part you got to do is work on what's important and not what's interesting. That's kind of a problem you got to get on with. And I think we're with a great partner. I mean, we couldn't have done this, without the strength of the Multimatic guys, and we still have those guys with us. And I feel like we're going to be as strong as we can be. As long as the BOP goes our way, we'll be in great shape.
Well, 3 wins with Multimatic kind of behind the scenes, and now we'll step back into racing in 2020 and beyond with Multimatic actually operating the race program for Mazda Motorsports. So you're in a great position there. You've got this incredible background, and it is great that you hit on the NASCAR side of things. 38 race weekends a year is pretty go. And I especially like what you said about sometimes you have to work on what's important, not just what's interesting. So I think Mazda Motorsports fans should know that they've got a guy at the helm who's ready to tackle the hard stuff, not just the interesting stuff. So Nelson, we're really excited to get going and operate 2020 and beyond underneath you. Basically, without being too general, your hopes, your plans for the rest of this season, as condensed as it's going to be, when things all end up at the end of this year, where do you want to see Mazda Motorsports sitting when we put it all away for this season?
Okay, so I think that's a great question, Tony. I mean, I think if you look at the various things that we're involved in, if you look at the DPI program, I think that if we could possibly win one of these longer events, and now they're all packed together at the end of the year, right? With the 3 endurance events are all at the end. I said when I first came into the job and got interviewed a little bit, I thought, if we could win one of these longer events, like the 12-hour race or the 24 or even Petit, those are the kind of the ones I think we haven't had a lot of success in, and maybe we could win one of those races. And I feel strongly that we can. So it's going to be a weird year. I don't really understand how testing's going to shake out yet. We'll see how that goes. But that's where I think on the DPI program. For the MX5 stuff, the MX5 Cup program, I think one of the things that I really just want to see us race all the races. I think, I want, we've had a bit of disturbance, obviously, in the whole schedule. I want to make sure that everybody is, safe and we have a really strong season and we get to all the races. I'm excited to get to finish the season at St. Pete. I think that'll be fun. It's something we haven't done, is do a street course in the last few years, right? So I'm just looking forward to, that thing's going to deliver really great racing no matter where you go. But I just want to make sure that we get everybody as much racing as possible. And then on the grassroots side, I think it's going to be a challenge, honestly, for everybody to get out and go racing. I think the runoffs is going to be a fun event. I may or may not be able to get to the runoffs this year, depending on the way the scheduling lays, because we're racing those weeks, and we're trying to limit the number of people that we have on the ground at each, Mazda people that are in each location. So for me, it might be a bit of a challenge to get there, but I'm looking forward to getting to some of those regional events.
Well, Nelson, I like the outlook you've got for 2020, the rest of the season and moving forward. It sounds like with the IMSA DPI program, we're focusing on durability and winning an endurance race. That's always good. The MX5 Cup, you're focused on wrapping things up with fun down in St. Pete. That's going to be a great time. And then it's great to hear your plan for getting as many grassroots racers out to the runoffs and supporting that event, as well as all of the grassroots events. So, unfortunately, this is how we have to meet, but I look forward to getting to shake your hand in person and celebrate a lot more really fun Mazda Motorsports moments with you.
Hey, Tony, thanks for having me on the show today. It's been really great talking to you, and I want you to have a great weekend.
Nelson Cosgrove, again, newly named Director of Operations at Mazda Motorsports North America. We're going to see him at Siebkins once we get to Road America a little bit later in the summer. That'll do it here on Mazda Motorsports Moments.